Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to the first show in our new game preview series here on the Falcoholic podcast. I am Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my co-host for these shows. He is Alan Strk at Alan. Just Strk now, not underscore. I think I updated your card, but I don't think I took the underscore out.
Oh yeah, if you could take
Yeah.
out the underscore.
Yeah,
We
that would
have
be
to
big.
evolve as we get older.
Yeah,
Underscore
yeah.
is a bit outdated.
Okay, well, that's one strike. If we get two more, we have to restart the show. So, no, it's all good, Alan. Welcome to the show. I know Alan will be very familiar to everyone who's been with the Falcoholic or Falcons podcast for any amount of time. He was the co-host of a podcast with Aaron Freeman, Falcons podcast, for basically forever. Alan, it's been a while since you've been regularly back on the podcast circuit. I know you've been itching to get back in. So, welcome, and how are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm buzzing. NFL's here, and I just for some reason this season particularly has me more amped up than usual. Usually around this time of year I get excited, but I just think there's so much variance in the NFL right now. Like there's about 7-8 teams that win the Super Bowl. And I know the Falcons are not one of those 7-8 teams, but I do feel like there's a lot to be proven with these young players. Like I have a piece, we'll do plugs later, but I've been working on an article the past few days breaking down some of the young players that could become potential cornerstones. And it's got me excited. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team could prove, because I think with the injection of youth, it kind of gets you a bit amped up. And of course, it is hate week.
Yes, it is hate week, folks. The Falcons do take on the hated division rival New Orleans Saints in week one of the 2022 NFL season. We are going to be breaking down all the details of the game because, let's be honest, we never really got to the game preview on the Wednesday shows anyway. So now you guys are going to be getting a full, proper game preview with myself and Alan each and every week that there's a game to preview. Probably going to take the bye week off, just letting you guys know. There's no game to preview, nothing to talk about.
Please, we have to enjoy our bye weeks.
Yes.
That's just a rule, especially with the extra game now.
Yeah, it's sacred. It's sacred. We have to treat it as such. So we are going to get into it. This is going to be our first attempt at these new game preview shows. I'm sure it'll be absolutely perfect, but, they may evolve over the course of the season. They will be available, obviously, to those listening on the podcast, on all of our audio feeds. There'll also be a video version available on YouTube for the Falcoholic Live viewers as well, so everyone gets a chance to enjoy. Thank you guys for tuning in. So let's get right to it, starting with the injury report. We record this on Thursday evening, afternoon, so we've seen 2 days of the injury report. Things might change slightly on Friday, but for now, Falcons looking pretty good. No changes from Wednesday so far, as both rookie wide receiver Drake London and reserve cornerback Darren Hall remained limited today. Neither one of those are terribly concerning. Obviously, Arthur Smith is very tight-lipped about the nature of injuries and whether guys will play or not. He's been very non-committal with Drake London in particular. Alan, do you have any concern about the availability for either of these guys?
Definitely with London, just because it's been kind of quiet. He didn't play the rest of the preseason after he suffered a knee injury against the Lions. I just think the fact that the team's not being as vocal about it is a bit concerning. I do ultimately think he will play, but of course, you would hope that he would have made a little bit more progress. But I think we're starting to get the impression with this. I'll still call it a new regime. I know it's year two, but I still feel like it's still kind of new. Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot, they don't give much information to the public. So I think maybe I have to become accustomed to that. But I'd still be a little cautious when it comes to Drake London. And I don't know. We don't really have much info on Darren Hall, correct?
No, not really. I think they've been extremely tight-lipped on that. It's, I guess, quadricep or something like that. The other one that was notable was Parker Hesse. He was excused from Wednesday's practice for personal reasons, good personal reasons, thankfully. Congratulations to Hesse. And he returned on Thursday, so no questions about his availability for this weekend. Falcons did play a lot of guys in the preseason, which we were all hoping they would do after last year. And we'll get into more of like the consequences of doing that last year and hopefully a better start this year in week one. But they've also managed to avoid a ton of preseason injuries. Pretty much everywhere except the defensive line, where they lost Vincent Taylor early in camp. Marlon Davidson is on injured reserve now. They also had a retirement, Eddie Goldman going out. So that is one spot where they've really kind of been smacked with some unfortunate stuff. But we'll hope that is the end of it there. We can have a healthy season for everyone. I think, unfortunately, it rarely happens that way, but we're still going to hope for it because injuries are the worst. And we just want everyone to get out there and be able to do their thing and succeed. So let's talk about the Saints report. Saints had a lot of players missing yesterday, and they still had some players missing today. So let's take a look. Yesterday, the Saints had 5 players not participating in practice. Wide receiver Traquan Smith, running back Dwayne Washington, starting cornerback Paulson Adebo, and 2 tackles, Landon Young and Tanner Owen. Tanner Owen was a personal absence, so not necessarily any long-term concern there. They also had several other starters missing, limited. Michael Thomas, limited with his hamstring injury. Center Aaron McCoy, and linebacker Pete Werner, along with safety JT Gray. So we don't have the Saints official report yet. I haven't been able to find it, but I do know that Traquan Smith and Paulson Adebo, probably the 2 biggest names of the guys that weren't participating on Wednesday, are also out today on Thursday. So that's obviously something to monitor. Those are both guys that were going to play a lot, Adebo in particular. And I believe the thought is that Michael Thomas is also going to be limited again today. So his status, much like Drake London, still sort of up in the air. What are your thoughts, Alan, on those injuries for the Saints, who seem to be coming into this one quite a bit more banged up than the Falcons?
Yeah, I think Adebo is far more significant than Traquan Smith because given the Chris Olave pick and, of course, Jarvis Landry coming in, Traquan Smith, I think he's just going to be somewhat of a deep threat. He'll play 20, 25 snaps a game. He's still someone that should be accounted for given his ability to stretch the field, and we all know Jameis Winston will show zero hesitation throwing the ball deep. But I think Adebo that's the big one because he kind of came on for the Saints last year, very under the radar because the Saints have kind of had a bit of turmoil when it comes to locking down that number 2 corner. We all know about Marshawn Lattimore, where he's been a stalwart there for several years, albeit a bit more inconsistent than years past. But Adebo, he came on and he's just like this feisty corner. Like he plays tight press coverage, and he's someone that is not afraid to get physical. So if he can't play, I think Bradley Roby would start, and Bradley Roby's decent, but he's kind of like a stopgap option. He's a bit undersized, and I think that could be beneficial for the Falcons, given Arthur Smith has pretty much gone all in this offseason on getting big receivers. So maybe you could exploit this mismatch if Debo doesn't play. I think it would be big if he misses out, just because Roby's not quite the same player he once was.
Yeah, and on that note, in terms of non-injury report related losses, but the Saints did just trade away Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to the Eagles, who was their slot defender. Mm-hmm. So that also pushes another person up the depth chart. I believe the slot will be PJ Williams, who the Falcons have victimized many times in the past.
We remember PJ Williams.
Yes. So Ridley, that becomes a starter for them. Yeah. I remember that game. That was a great game. So the secondary suddenly thin for New Orleans, and of course the situation with Marcus May. I mean, they haven't seemed to indicate that he will not play, but May was arrested just last week, I believe, for allegedly threatening a minor with a firearm. So that may not be a permanent fixture on their roster this year. We'll see how that progresses. But certainly the team weathering a lot of losses in the secondary, and rookie offensive tackle Trevor Penning, who was sort of projected to possibly take over left tackle for Teron Armstead, who left, I believe suffered a Liz Frank or some other sort of foot injury, had surgery on that. Will not play this week, obviously. Will not play for the majority of the season. May be back late, but that's another big loss that's not on the injury report, but certainly something to keep in mind. But yeah, speaking of the Saints defense, let's go ahead and go right into the Falcons offense versus the Saints defense. And starting with the secondary, because we're on that topic now, this is something that used to be the strength of the Saints for quite a while. They had Marcus Williams, who departed in free agency as one of the best safeties in the NFL. Marshawn Lattimore, despite what we all think about him, a good cornerback one at worst. At times has been an elite cornerback one. And I know Paulson Adebo, despite the fact that he wasn't really well liked by PFF last year, I think he was sort of an up and down player, sort of a boom bust guy. He was apparently turning heads in camp as like someone who was maybe going to have a second year breakout. So the loss of him, the loss of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the loss of Marcus Williams, this is a very different looking secondary. They did, of course, add Tyrann Mathieu in the offseason, which is someone that they're hoping will come in. But Mathieu did have a down year by his standards last year as well. And of course, their other starter, like we just said, Marcus May, also coming off an injury-plagued down year. So potentially a group that could be vulnerable to a new look Falcons receiving core. And I talked about all the Saints players, so I'll let you talk about the Falcons players here. Do you think there's some opportunities here for this new look Falcons group of receivers to take advantage of perhaps an undermanned and relatively green Saints secondary, and that they haven't really had much chance to play together?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm intrigued by this Falcons receiving coach. I know all the talk, I've seen headlines all week. Oh, besides Kyle Pitts, no one scares you, which look is understandable. But I think just adding a variety of different players, yes, albeit a lot of them are big, but I think Zaccheaus has had a strong camp. He was great in the preseason. I think he's ready to come out here and just showcase he's more than a deep threat. If Damari Bird or our favorite Jared Birdhart gets snaps, like they're guys that could create separation. So there's there's a lot of attention has gone towards Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Brian Edwards, but I think the Falcons, they have more than just having these big body receivers that could make contested catches and be problems in the red zone. It's like, no, they have actually receivers that on a 3rd and 5 could create those yards of separations on hitches or comebacks and get the key first down. So I think this is one of the more exciting matchups. It's not being talked about as much just because the lack of big names, but I'm intrigued, and especially, I don't know, I think at some point we'll see Kyle Pitts and Honey Badger go at it, and I think that's going to be the big one.
Yeah. Yeah, that one will be interesting. We're not going to get any chain snatching with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson gone, unfortunately.
And no Russell Gage either, because those were the two that were going at it. I remember.
Yeah. So it's going to be very different there. But I agree, like the Falcons wide receivers, especially once Calvin Ridley left last year, I mean, it was a disaster. Zaccheaus was fine, but Zaccheaus is like your third receiver.
Right.
Like, and him being forced to be your number one, and Tajay Sharp played like way too many snaps, and it was just sort of a disaster out there. Russell Gage obviously played, I think, extremely well considering the circumstances. He exits, but other than Russell Gage, I think everywhere else, like the Falcons have upgraded every other spot in that receiving core pretty entirely. The depth chart from top to bottom is better. We still have to see what we're going to get from Drake London. We just have not really seen a lot. We haven't seen any live game action. We saw the one nice catch in the preseason. But like Brian Edwards, better than everyone on last year's receiver depth chart that was playing most of the season, not named Russell Gage. Zaccheaus, hopefully having a better season. Obviously, Drake London's here. And even the guys behind them, right? Like Kaderil Hodge had a good camp. Demir Bird, we know what he can do as a deep threat and a good route runner. And then Jared Birdhart was like the star of the preseason. So I think every one of those guys you're sort of like happy about as opposed to last season's depth chart. Like I think it's universally better. Is it great yet or like good? I think the jury's still out. I think if we were to get like London hitting as a wide receiver 1 and Edwards being a good wide receiver 2, then I think you could say like, oh, this is actually a good receiving core, but we just haven't seen it yet.
I see you have guys that can be playmakers, because last year, like Sharp was so limited. Zaccheaus had way too much on him. Now it's just like, okay, the onus is off. I think he could get back to just being someone that could play 25, 30 snaps a game, stretch the field. Meanwhile, you have someone like Edwards, who is a big play threat, big wide receiver that you could kind of trust him to go up and go get it. I'm of course all the attention is gonna be on Drake London, just because we want to see, when you have a top 10 pick, someone with his tape, it's just like unleash him already. I want to see what he could do, like get him in the middle of the field. I want to see what he can do after the catch. And Saints, they're notorious for trying to force fumbles, but will that affect their technique? Because if you don't get a clean hit on London, he's gonna run through you. So
yeah.
I'm excited to see, because Arthur Smith's gonna get those opportunities. He's gonna run a lot of play action, a lot of it in breaking routes. I just think that's where Drake London's going to eat. And if it happens week 1, whether it's Marshawn Lattimore covering him or maybe Saints play a little more zone, it'll be good to see. But I do want to take into account, because I don't know if you would agree with this. You think Dennis Allen's the most blitz-happy defensive play caller in the league?
I mean, he's certainly up there. I'd have to look at his splits last year, but the Saints love to blitz, which I think has always been weird, considering that they're like generally their edge pass rush has been pretty good.
Mhm.
Like their rush with 4 has been good. So it's like, is it really necessary to blitz a lot? But he loves to do it. So I think that they will.
Yeah.
And that's where that's a great segue into our next section, which is the offensive line. Definitely the biggest question mark on the team going into the season. Still a big question mark, although I think we do feel a little bit better coming out of the preseason. Like they didn't get blasted. They were fine for the most part. They didn't. I don't believe they allowed a sack the first string offensive line. They might have allowed one. I can't remember, but they certainly allowed some pressure. But we were able to see Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder showing off their mobility to evade the pressure that was allowed. It wasn't anything like catastrophic. The Falcons are going to be returning 3 starters from last year officially now, with Jake Matthews at left tackle. Had a good year, not his best year certainly by his standards, but still a good year. Chris Lindstrom at right guard, who was basically an elite right guard. I feel like he doesn't get the respect he deserves, but very, very good run and pass blocker. And then Caleb McGarry at right tackle, who, of course, we all know, extremely up and down player, but had a good preseason. And then 2 new starters. Drew Dahlman was officially named the starting center, which is pretty newsworthy, over incumbent Matt Hennessy. And then at left guard, Elijah Wilkinson, playing a new position for him, and was also pretty solid, especially when you compare him to last year's starter in Jalen Mayfield. So what do you think about the Falcons' offensive line? Do you think they have any chance against the Saints' defensive line, which for years now seems to have really been a constant thorn in Atlanta's side?
I do think the Saints defense line looks a little more undermanned than in past years. Like I felt that in past years they had more options. Like you look at it now, they haven't really added anyone new. It's like kind of the same players. Now, granted, those players are still good. I think even though he hasn't quite lived up to his first round status, partially because of that ridiculous trade. But Marcus Davenport's always a threat. We know about Cam Jordan, and Daniel Amata tends to have his best games against the Falcons. It's just every time I see him against Falcons, he has like 1.5 sacks, like 5 pressures. I don't know why it happens, but hey, this time you have to at least have some optimism on Elijah Wilkins. It could at least keep him at bay. But I think, look, as we all know, the big matchup's going to be McGarry against Cam Jordan. Because Cam Jordan, even though he is moved around quite a bit on the defense line, he does primarily line up as a left-sided edge rusher. So whether how much the Falcons ship will be something to monitor. But look, as much as we could talk about the Saints front four, we know Dennis Allen. To me, it's him and Todd Bowles as like the most blitz happy defensive play callers. And how they utilize Demario Davis is huge. Like he's someone that he'll come on delays, come on double A gaps. Like he's someone that can absolutely wreck a game. So as much as we talk about this being in the trenches, which it is absolutely, I do think there is more than maybe in your standard preview for games. You have to take account for the Saints linebackers and Dennis Allen's play calling.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're extremely, like you mentioned it, they're extremely thin on the interior. Like they do have good starters. I think Shai Tuttle's a little bit underrated. He's a solid starter. David Onyemata is very good when he's healthy. He hasn't really been able to stay healthy recently, but he's healthy this week. So we gotta be aware of that. But like behind them, and this is a consequence of the cap manipulation. Like yes, they still have most of their starters, but the depth behind them is basically gone. They're basically relying on Contavious Street, Tano Passanio, Carl Granderson. These are the guys.
Bodies,
like they don't have, like before it was like they had Malcolm Brown back there and they had Sheldon Rankins back there, and they've slowly bled all of these guys over the years.
Alex Okafor was another one too that they got a couple good years out of. So they used to always go like 7-8 deep. Now just like they could do that, but it's just guys. Like outside of Jordan Davenport, you mentioned Tuttle, and then take what you get with Amata. Like after that, it's I guess they're hoping for someone to break out. But like you said, this is the consequences of the New Orleans Saints yearly offseason spending spree.
I mean, you look at the stars and you're like, oh, this team's still really good. The cap didn't hurt them at all. But where it's hurt them is they can't afford any good depth players anymore. They have to start doing what the Falcons are doing, and it's like, okay, we're gonna raid the waiver wire and the bargain bin to try to find contributors, and we'll see if those guys work out or not. I
mentioned they're also getting older. Their best players. You look at Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis. They're 34 years old, and great stat with Cam Jordan. I saw a couple of days ago. He had 13 sacks last year, but he only had 42 pressures.
Yeah, that's low for
So
him. Yeah.
yeah, so it was kind of like he was efficient, but then again, he wasn't generating the same amount of pressure, and I don't think that's sustainable because as we know, if you follow PFF and you've watched the Falcons and insert Vic Beasley, like it just seeing a low pressure amount but high sacks, we know it's not sustainable. So I wonder if Cam Jordan's on a decline a bit. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
could be.
yeah, because he's been doing this since 2011.
Yes, as we well know, he sacked Matt Ryan more than any other player in the NFL. Will not be sad when he retires, certainly. But yeah, it is interesting. We'll see. This is a very, very difficult test for the Falcons' offensive line in week 1. And the other side of that coin is, oh yeah, did you have something else? Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, have you gotten into like the decision to start Dolman over Hennessy? Did you agree with
We
that?
talked about it, but yeah, I mean, I haven't talked about it with you, so we can. I mean, that's certainly noteworthy enough to cover. So yeah, I mean, to me, like I didn't see a ton of difference between them both in the preseason and in camp. I think they both looked fine. To me, it's probably like this regime drafted Dahlman. This regime has Dahlman at a cheaper salary because he's a 4th-round pick instead of a 3rd-round pick, and they have him under contract on his rookie deal for 1 more season. So all things being equal, those things I think sort of push them more towards Dahlman, who this regime actually chose. And I mentioned it on last night's show, like, Wednesday's show, because you guys are getting this on Friday, that like of the top 15 centers, I think according to PFF or another site that was writing it up, like more than half were day 3 picks or undrafted players. Like the center position is one that you can find really good players late. They often take a few years to hit. They don't usually come in and just light the league on fire unless they're Creed Humphrey. And, you were calling for Creed Humphrey for all the entire offseason. They didn't select Creed Humphrey, but I mean, I'm over that definitely by now. But
Damn, missed on an all pro.
yeah, and I'll just say, there were definitely people in the Falcons that were high on Creed Humphrey as well. So, but there's a lot of players they liked. So
Crazy thing is, both Dahlman and Hennessy were kind of draft darlings. Like Brandon Thorne, who everyone respects for his offensive line insight, he highly rated both centers. So hasn't quite worked with Hennessy. Hopefully, it works out with Dahlman because I just think the big issue with Hennessy just last year, I thought there were a lot of issues communication-wise, and he just seemed that position, particularly when teams ran twists, it just seemed like someone always had that free space going to the A-gap, and poor Matt Ryan got crushed. And, man, you cannot have communication issues against the Saints.
No, and you have to wonder, like, that's not something you see on tape. Like, you don't know, did the center get the right call or did someone whiff? Like, it's almost impossible to know that just from watching film. You're not hearing the calls. You don't know what the protection was supposed to be. So it's really hard for us to evaluate, but that could easily have been why that happened. Like why Dahlman was picked, even though on the field they looked pretty similar. It might be that, look, Dahlman maybe is a better communicator or is a little bit further ahead in terms of the mental game. Maybe, it could be that. It could be that he's more comfortable making those calls and is better at that. He has the NFL pedigree. I believe he's the son of a former 49ers player, Chris Dahlman. And, not to, get all Power 5 versus Group of 5, but Dahlman was at Stanford, probably had a little bit more advanced coaching help as opposed to Matt Hennessy, who was at Temple. Temple's a fine program, not trying to throw shade at Temple or anything, but Stanford's going to have a lot more resources as a bigger private school than Temple, and it's possible that Dahlman had more advanced, technical help. But at the same time, Hennessy has another year in the NFL, so you'd think that advantage would have been sort of canceled out. But I am interested in seeing, because they're going to get a baptism by fire in terms of the blitzing, as you mentioned, like with Dennis Allen out there. So,
unfortunately, with Hennessy, I think he played like his rookie year left guard half the time. Like I remember he got reps there. So, just one thing to note. But yeah, like Saints, Rams, Drew Dahlman, better be ready.
Yeah, it's they're not going to get a break to start this off. Certainly not. And then we come to the basically the constant strength of the New Orleans defense, which is their run defense. It's generally been number 1 or number 2 in terms of yards per carry and overall yardage allowed. The Falcons are really trying to sort of make themselves into a more balanced offense. We know that's what Arthur Smith wants to do, to take some of the pressure off the quarterback and off the pass protection, to be honest. but the Falcons have to contend with a really, really stout run defense. The depth on the interior isn't there for the Saints like it has been in the past. So this may be a situation where they start really strong against the run, but maybe the Falcons should keep up the assault because they don't have the guys to rotate in the middle to keep them fresh. They do still have terrific linebackers in both Demario Davis and Pete Werner, who was an excellent addition for the Saints last year. I think they have a new starter at the Sam spot, Caden Ellis, who I'm not super familiar with, but he's a new face there. But the Falcons also have some new pieces. Obviously, Cordarrelle Patterson probably going to be the nominal starter. Tyler Algier, the rookie at running back, and of course Damian Williams as well. What do you think about the chances for the Falcons in combination with Marcus Mariota and his ability to run the football? How do you like the Falcons' chances of being able to move the ball on the ground?
Not particularly high. I just hope they're a little bit more persistent with it because I do think there were times last year, as much as Arthur Smith preaches about running the ball, they kind of abandoned it. I do think, given Cordarrelle Patterson's playmaking ability and Tyler Allgeier's ability to run through contact, although we got to see if it fully translates to the pros, but I was very encouraged what he showed in preseason. I think they have to be committed to it in a way, like where it just, even if they go down 2 scores and say it's their quarter, like, don't fully abandon it because you don't want Dennis Allen to start styling blitzes every down. And we know Mariota's tendency to struggle against pressure. So I would like to see at least, Patterson's going to get the, not bulk of the carries, but you obviously know he's going to get at least 10 to 15 touches. But just keep diversifying. And probably I could see them going more towards outside than inside. Like I could see a bunch of stretch plays. I think that was kind of like Patterson's bread and butter last year. So try to stretch the Saints defense out, even though, like you said, they have outstanding linebackers. Like to me, Demario Davis is like one of the most savvy players in the league. He just always seems to be on point. So they have it's a tall order, but
it is.
You don't want to become one dimensional.
No, that's going to be the end if they force you into that. And that will certainly be their game plan, to shut down the run and play a lot of man, which they have done really well in the past. But with the presence of a quarterback like Marcus Mariota, I do wonder if they have to abandon man coverage, if Mariota rips a couple runs off here and there. Despite how good their linebackers are, they're not used to covering that aspect of the Falcons. They've mentioned in press conferences that that's something they're going to prepare for. I'm sure they will, but it's one thing to prepare for it, but you have very little tape on it. So it's in a real game situation. I expect the Falcons to really stress them with that aspect of their offense that they really haven't had a chance to deploy before. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And also, of course, Mariota, just seeing how he plays in general over a course of a full game in limited action. He's looked excellent, just like everything you've wanted to see in the preseason you saw. Like, he was sharp. He used his legs well. He avoided contact, later in the preseason. Early on, he was a little aggressive.
That Detroit game had people holding their breath a bit.
Yeah, but he looked like he got calmed down a little bit after that. I'm excited. I do feel better about this matchup going into it with the changes on the offensive line. Elijah Wilkinson being in there instead of Jalen Mayfield, and Drew Dahlman. He didn't play a lot of snaps, but he did score 78.3 according to PFF. So hey, that gives him a bright green dot on the lineup. So hey, we're just gonna pretend that that's his true ranking, and we'll just hope that carries over into the whole season. So anything else you want to say about the Falcons offense versus Saints defense before we move to the other side of the ball?
I think we did a full breakdown. I'm just wondering, when it comes to the Saints defense, like obviously Dennis Allen's the head coach now. Like, I don't know if it really matters who their D coordinators. Like, I saw Chris Richard's on their coaching staff, which was a bit of a blast in the past. But I assume Dennis Allen's going to be at the forefront, and he's one of the best defensive play callers in the league. This is a matchup where it's like, Falcons brought in Arthur Smith for these types of games. Like, all right, Smith, you consider yourself to be one of the best offensive play callers. Let's see what you got.
Yeah. We need to see more than we saw last year, because that play calling was just, it looked like limited. I mean, it's hard to quantify that, but we saw Smith just like deploying these plays that were so creative in Tennessee. And that's after he'd been there he'd been in the organization for 5 or 6 years. He's been offensive coordinator for multiple years. He was comfortable there with his personnel, with everything going on. And it was probably unreasonable to expect that out of the gate with a completely new roster and staff around him. I hope that we see year 2, much like Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta, that, okay, now the playbook is here, it's installed. he's more comfortable, more willing to dig into those interesting plays, those good play designs, and we get to see a little bit more of that creativity this year. Because that, I think, was one of the factors in them being quite poor in the red zone, despite the presence of Arthur Smith, who in his 2 years previously as offensive coordinator was number one both years, and it wasn't particularly close to the next team on the list. So, because if the Falcons are close to the top in red zone efficiency, they don't got to get down there that many times to be a high-scoring offense. Like if they're scoring 75% of the time they're down there, like Smith was doing in Tennessee, can overcome a lack of overall yardage. So
exactly, I think they were 23rd last year.
Yeah,
off the top of my head, which obviously not good enough.
Yeah. So we'll hope for the best there. Moving over to the other side of the ball, the Falcons do have quite a few new starters. Starting with the second, we'll keep it with the same flow because I thought that worked well. The Falcons have a new starter opposite A.J. Terrell and Casey Hayward Jr., who was one of the best corners in the NFL last year, according to PFF. He was 12th on their list overall. Didn't look like outstanding in the preseason, but again, like they only played a handful of snaps with the starters. It's not really something that I would read too much into. In camp, he looked good. I mean, he got postered by Drake London on that like one-on-one play with absolutely no safety help, and again, wouldn't draw too much from that. But certainly an upgrade over Fabian Moreau, you would think, opposite Terrell, and we know who AJ Terrell is. He's great. Just hoping that he can, even if he replicates 90% of what he was last year, he'll be an elite corner. So those two, very exciting. The big question is sort of at nickel at the slot defender position because Isaiah Oliver is going to start the season on IR. So who do you see getting the start there? Do you think it will be someone like D. Alford, who had the best camp in preseason, or are they going to go to like a veteran like Mike Ford or Darren Hall even?
We spoke about how these preseason games were going to have some influence on how the team is going to run, at least snaps-wise, and I think this is the prime example. Like, to me, D. Alford was a clear standout through, of course, those 3 games, and Mike Ford, I thought, really struggled in particular against Detroit. It just didn't seem like it was that fluid. And Darren Hall, we don't know his stats, but I thought Darren Hall showed flashes in the slot as well. It just seems like you got to pick someone because it's pretty clear Terrell and Hayward are going to be the outside corners. I don't think Terrell has much experience going in the slot. And at 32 years old, at his size, I don't think Hayward has the ability to necessarily go inside the slot. It has to be an ideal fit. And I think just based on tape.
He's played it, but he
played it
a lot. Hayward's played it a lot. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But not recently, I think. I think it was quite a few years ago. He was an outside guy with the Raiders almost
right.
all the
Maybe
time.
those back in the Green Bay days, which is about 6-7 years ago. So that's
why it was a while ago.
Forgetting.
Yeah.
But it definitely holds a lot of credence because, look, we know Jarvis Landry's expertise in the slot. If Michael Thomas, if healthy, what he could do in the slot. So it's going to be, they're going to get pressed, whoever starts. I think maybe D. Alford, you give him the shot. Darren Hall is not healthy just because I don't think Mike Ford showed much in preseason that would make you feel encouraged. But I think Darren Hall would get the start there just based on, he actually played a lot of snaps, I believe, the last 5 games of last season. Yeah. So if he's healthy, I do think he gets the nod, but it wouldn't surprise me to see D. Alford get some snaps there just because he was a huge standout in preseason.
Yeah, that's the most interesting question mark, I think. And we haven't heard anything at practice about it, so I'm sure they're not tipping their hand as to who it will be. Mm-hmm. I think I'm hoping it'll be D. Alford. I think he's earned it. But again, like Darren Hall did play it a lot last year. We didn't see him play it like at all in the preseason, really. So to me, it's like I think they're trying to make him more of their outside reserve guy. But
he was a little banged up too in the preseason.
Yeah, he was a little bit. Yeah, so it could be that. But yeah, I just don't want it to be Mike Ford. Like Mike Ford, he's your core special teamer, and like if he has to come on the field at corner, you're not really expecting a lot. So I would hate if we go into it with like Mike, like you're the starter. Like let's not like go into that. Like I think Alford has potential to be an actual good slot starter. He's done it at a professional level a lot, even if it hasn't been the NFL. A lot of people dunk on the CFL and they're like, oh, it's not the NFL, and like you're right, but how many bad NFL players think they can just go to the CFL and have success and just don't? Like they have no success at all. So it's not quite the NFL, but it's probably better than you think. And Alford was maybe the best corner in all the CFL.
And let's not pretend CFL hasn't produced talent.
Yes, it has. And Fontenot apparently is a big fan of getting talent from the CFL. He had a hand in a lot of the CFL players the Saints have tried out and had success with over the years. So I think you go with that. You see what happens. Give him a chance until Oliver comes back and see how it goes. But I wouldn't be shocked if it was Darren Hall. Darren Hall was okay last year as a rookie, so hopefully there's better play there.
But similar to Drew Dahlman, they're getting thrown to the fire. Like, even though I know Winston, we'll talk about more, not necessarily the type to throw short to intermediate, I just think given the Saints receiving corps, it's like it's there. Like they have talent in the slot. Like this isn't going to be a case of last year where they have no receivers and like they're throwing the ball Marquez Callaway 8 to 10 times a game. Now it's just like no, they look pretty loaded there. It's just a matter of how is it going to fit the new offense play calling and of course James Winston.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. A lot of new faces in the receiving corps for the Saints. Michael Thomas, maybe going to be back. We'll see. Certainly seems like he will be limited in some capacity, which seems to be pretty on brand for Michael Thomas at this point, unfortunately. Chris Olave, the rookie, a lot of hype. Deep threat, really good route runner. My wide receiver 2 in the draft, I believe, behind Drake London, guy I really enjoyed. And then Jarvis Landry coming over to play the slot. Landry's slowing down a little bit. He's going into his age 30. Well, he'll be 30 during the season, I think. He's not 30 yet. Clearly has stuff left in the tank, but he's not really the number one target in an offense anymore. But definitely a huge upgrade over what they had last year. The weapons looking more formidable, certainly. I'm interested to see if they even feature a tight end as a receiver this year. I know Adam Troutman is there, but he's basically never amounted to what they were hoping for as a receiver. As a blocker, he's been better. And then they signed, I think, Juwan Johnson from the was the 49ers, and they converted him to tight end.
Yeah, he showed flashes last year. I think he had 3 touchdowns. So.
Yeah, definitely like a big possession receiver that they're trying to convert to tight end. So maybe there could be something there. What do you think about the Saints' weapons and how they match up with the Falcons' secondary?
I think I'm more curious about how they're going to mesh with Jameis, like I mentioned before, just because it's just you have 2 receivers and Thomas and Landry that are such clear possession receivers that we know they don't stretch the field. And you have a quarterback who, and shout out to Mike Brown, he said it best, like Jameis Winston has never seen a throw down the seam he couldn't make. It could be triple coverage, like Richie Grant, Jalen Hawkins, who that's what I mentioned. Like they could have fine coverage, and Jameis Winston still might throw the ball there. And look, maybe he's matured over the past years, and obviously learned from his mistakes. But it's just you watch Jameis Winston, it's just like, all right, he doesn't have Sean Payne anymore to scheme up those high percentage looks. How's it going to look like with Pete Carmichael, and how's it going to fit with this offense? Because last year he could just throw to whoever because there was no receivers. It's just like just get these guys the ball. Now it's just like you have clear players with, let's be blunt, pretty big egos between Thomas and Landry. They expect to be targeted, and then you have obviously Olave. But it's just like I wonder how much of a conflict is it going to be, or are they going to mesh well? And with the DMPs, he plays a lot of cover too, and I didn't think it was necessarily a good fit last year. I wonder if he's going to reduce it given the problems they had caused last year. Because besides like AJ Terrell making a ridiculous pass breakup, I just feel like the Falcons allowed so many big plays when playing cover 2 last year.
Yeah. They didn't allow any 40-plus yard plays though all season. So somehow
you have to take those small victories.
Somehow, like some teams allowed like 20, and the Falcons did like nothing, allowed none all year, which is just an insane stat to me, considering everything you mentioned. But yeah, DMP is going to play a lot of split coverage, split safeties. He's going to rotate. And really, I think he would like to play cover 2 against the Saints. Like, this is a team that's going to try to attack you deep. They're going to try to throw the ball downfield with Jameis Winston. The Falcons' new safety duo is going to have a lot to do with that. Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins, can they make the Saints pay for some of Winston's I can make that throw mistakes? Because sometimes he will make the throw, and a lot of times he won't. That was sort of the story of his career in Tampa Bay. You live by the Winston, you die by the Winston. That's sort of their ethos. I wonder if it will go back to more of that now without Sean Payton calling the shots. Like, can Pete Carmichael keep Winston's, urges for throwing the football downfield? Not talking about anything else, folks, in check. And I don't know. We haven't really seen much of Hawkins and Grant together. We will be seeing that. They are the starters. So I'm curious to see how that goes. The other aspect, of course, is the Falcons' pass rush, which, as we all know, was absolutely putrid last year. 18 sacks, of which, of course, TJ Watt himself had far more. The good news is the Saints' offensive line nowhere near the dominant force it once was. James Hurst, who's their swing tackle and who's going to be their starter now with Trevor Penning sideline. Not a bad swing tackle, very solid swing tackle, certainly capable of playing left tackle. He's not going to be a giant liability there. But the interior of that line that's just littered with first-round picks, not nearly as good as expected last year or in recent years. Andres Pete, who they were paying an obscene amount of money to, graded out as a well below average starter last year. Eric McCoy just barely average at center, and then Cesar Ruiz, another first-round pick, also a below-average starter. Obviously, Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle is elite. He's one of the best right tackles in the game, but it seems like that interior is the place to attack. Alan, do the Falcons have the personnel to do anything about that, other than, of course, the man himself, Grady Jarrett?
Oh, man. I'm just wondering how they're going to utilize new edge rushers, because that's what everyone has their eyes on when it comes to Carter, Dite, and Malone. I do think D'Angelo Malone's, they're going to bring him along slowly. I can't see him playing more than 20 snaps, but still make a difference with that. And I do think Hurst can be exploited. I just want to see Dean Pease crank up the blitzes. Like I don't know if he was kind of held back last year just because he didn't trust Deion Jones, and just given that the defense, as he said, what did he say? Was it 60 or 70% he called?
I think it was like 60%, or like it was like right around the middle. Yeah.
So you watch old DP's defenses, they get after it. I'm just wondering, given this matchup, given the way Winston throws the ball, just like, can they at least crank it up a little bit? Do you have belief in the linebackers? He is accustomed to having Rashaan Evans, so could that make a difference? Because I still think the Falcons are going to be a little bit dependent when it comes to getting creative. Because when it comes to a front four, just like I don't think they quite have the personnel yet. But it is a lot. I would say there's a lot more optimism this year compared to last year, where it just seemed like they didn't do anything. Now it's just like, okay, Lorenzo Carter's had 2 pretty solid seasons with the Giants. And then the draft picks, both you watch them on tape, between violent hand usage, the explosive first step. It's just like, okay, these guys have got some talent. Like they could bring it. It's not just going to be like, all right, we're just hoping and praying.
Steven Means, let's go.
Yeah. Well, I try to refrain from that, but
I try to refrain. Yeah.
But I think if you want to get to it now, just man, what's the interior personnel going to look like? Because we talk about the Saints looking light, the Falcons look even lighter.
It's just all unproven guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Grady Jarrett, obviously, like we're going to be depending on Grady Jarrett so much. He's going to be soaking up as much attention as he can handle. So it's really going to come down to like Anthony Rush. Like Anthony Rush has to start demanding double teams. Like this man is 6'5", 350 with huge arms and all this stuff. Like he needs to start demanding double teams or making plays, particularly against the run, so that he can free up Jarrett to go do what he does best. If he can't do that, it's going to be a long season for the run defense. And I love Anthony Rush, a friend of the show, Anthony Rush.
Yes.
I think he can. I think he can do it. I think the team has shown an enormous amount of faith in him. Like when Eddie Goldman retired, they did not run out and sign another nose tackle. They were like, okay, Rush, it's your show. Let's go. We do have a young nose tackle behind him in Timmy Horn, who I think had some flashes in the preseason. So there's a little bit of depth to rotate there. I think nose tackle, they'll be fine. I don't know that Rush is going to be like a Jordan Davis level player, for them. No one will, because Jordan Davis is an alien. But I think at 2 of those spots, like you're okay. Like Rush, you're okay. Grady Jarrett obviously is great. Taquan Graham is sort of like the wild card. Like they've put an enormous amount of faith in Taquan Graham. He's a starter for them. We didn't really get to see him a lot in the preseason because they treated him like a starter. Didn't play him a lot.
He did show flashes though.
Yeah,
I believe he had
exactly.
against the Lions and the Jets.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like, we're terrified of this group because all we've seen in regular season from Taquan Graham is like some flashes late in the season, but generally a rotational guy. He's now a starter. That could be good if he hits and if he translates what he showed in the preseason this year to the regular season. Maybe it's like, oh, actually the interior is fine. Taquan Graham is a good starter. We just don't know. And then the guys behind them are sort of just like, oh, we got Matt Dickerson off waivers, and we have, undrafted free agent Timmy Horn. Don't really know what to expect from those guys. So a lot of question marks there. At the edge position, it has to be better than last year, but just how much better? Like Lorenzo Carter, I think is going to be a really good piece for them. He can do everything. He's maybe the best like coverage edge, which is a weird niche for him, but he is like an elite coverage edge. Like he can cover tight ends down the seam and stuff like that. So that's a little wrinkle they can throw in. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Also, definitely would need him to contribute on screens because
Yeah.
we haven't spoke about Alvin Kamara yet, but he's one of the most terrifying players in space. And the Saints just year in and year out always tend to just wreck the Falcons on screens. Like, that's just one of the things I've become accustomed to seeing when it comes to this rivalry. Just like the Saints dial up the screen. If it doesn't go for 6 yards, I consider that a win.
Yes, we could just keep it under 3 yards of play. That's how we win. But then, I think Carter's going to be fine. He's probably going to play the most snaps of like any defensive lineman. I think they're going to treat him like a linebacker, try to give him as many, like almost 100% of the snaps if he can take them. And then we've got Ade Ogundiji, who's probably going to be their like primary run stuffing pass rusher, like edge guy. And then we've got Arnold Ebiketie. We've got D'Angelo Malone, the other rookie, and then Quentin Bell, who flashed in the preseason, especially on special teams. Who do you think is going to end up playing the most snaps opposite Carter? Do you think it will be Ogundiji? And it might just be a factor of the Saints maybe playing more like running snaps. But who do you think is actually going to end up being the quote unquote starter next to Carter?
Yeah, I think you're spot on when it comes to the pace of the game, because that's what I was considering. Because for all the receiving talent, and we talk about how much James Woodson throws the ball downfield, he has a big arm. I could easily see the Saints running ball 25, 30 times.
Yeah.
Because still got Mark Ingram on their roster who could, spell for like 5-7 carries. And yeah, I do think it's probably going to be Carter and Ogundeji, even though depending on the pace of the game, I think it's going to ultimately determine. But I could see the Falcons playing more base than usual, given the Saints personnel. And I do think, given that it's Winston's first game in almost a year, I think they're going to bring him along slowly.
Yeah. Well, during the show, speaking of the Saints offensive line, center Eric McCoy has just agreed to a long-term extension worth over $63.75 million.
Oof.
So,
Saints like paying their interior linemen, I guess.
Well, hopefully, I think they're hoping it's not just like Andres Pete's contract, where he's basically been awful ever since he signed it. McCoy had a really good rookie year, to be fair, but the last year was not good. Yeah,
Pete's been colossally bad. You watch certain guards, and of course, Falcons know about the left guards.
We know about that.
You can spot a liability, and he is definitely a liability.
Yeah.
The one thing I definitely wanted to talk about, because it was just announced today, is the decision from Dean Pease to give Michael Walker the green dot. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's sort of surprising, right? You think he might have leaned towards giving it to someone like Rashaan Evans, who he knows the scheme for multiple years in the system. But I think they really are trying to sort of show Michael Walker that they have a ton of faith in him, that they want him to be the face of that defense. Whereas I think they want Rashaan Evans maybe more of a rotational guy as the season goes on, because we all know his liabilities in coverage. He can't do it. Like, he just straight up can't do it. Like, if he's out there on third down, he's blitzing. And that's fine.
Thumper.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, they needed a thumper. After last year, they just really didn't have one. And Evans is a really good blitzer. That's why he's here. That's why he's going to play a ton of snaps, because they need guys to rush the passer from the linebacking core, because they're going to need help. And we already talked about that. But yeah, Michael Walker, I think it's really interesting. I hope that he takes this opportunity and runs with it, because he's been very patient, and I think he deserves it. So.
Right. I think he was underutilized last year. He probably should have received more snaps. He's one of the players I'm most fascinated about, because I think, similar to Foyle Lucan, like those, even though they're definitely different players, like those first 2 years, I thought Lucan definitely in 2019 should have played more. I think Walker should have played more last year. So now it's like that third year, can he make that leap? And the coaching staff is putting him in the position to become a leader. Now it's just like, can he take those spurts and put them into sustainable, consistent, high-level play? That's a big question, because I think he has a ton of ability in coverage. We see him flash there. Just now it's like, how are you going to take on blocks? How are you going to take on a Saints team that notoriously runs on the Falcons?
Yeah.
I think just handling that 3-down grind is going to be something that I'm watching for him. The Falcons got depth at linebacker, and I do think they will utilize a variety of different bodies. The fact they give Walker the green dot kind of shows their trust. Like, okay, you're probably going to play 3 downs, and only going to come off the field if like you're gassed or maybe certain situations in the red zone.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Nick Kwiatkowski came back to the roster after being shuffled around with some of the, IR moves they were making. I suspect he'll be the guy that rotates in on third down for Evans if they want to go to more of a coverage look early in the season, and then hopefully at some point we'll get to see Troy Anderson out there whenever he's ready. Just because I just like late in the season, if they're out of it, I just want to see Troy Anderson like flying around. Like I don't even care. Like
I mean, that was the highlight of the Jets game. That second half, he was just flying.
Yeah.
There was times where the flying led to him being on the turf and missing tackles, but it was just
fun.
He could cover space, and just like look at this point in the season, if you're say 4-10, it's like experiment a little bit, and you invested a second round pick, so give him that experience.
Yeah, I think the key to this for the Falcons, and this will be our sort of transition into our predictions and sort of our keys here. Like, I think they have to stop the run. I think that's going to be the number one thing. Like, if they can't limit the Saints' run game, it's going to be bad. Like, they're going to be giving up these 15-play drives, and they're going to have to go away from that split safety that they want to play and go to more cover one and stuff like that to try to limit the run. So they have to find a way to stop the Saints run game consistently to force them to throw it, because you want to force them into your strength, which is your secondary, or at least we hope it will be again this year. Because the pass rush probably isn't going to be doing, like, hopefully they'll be limiting like you from having 5 seconds in the pocket. Like, I don't think they're going to be forcing quick throws or anything like that, but I think they should hopefully be able to limit like, oh, you're able to sit back there for like 20 seconds like they were last year. But I think like if they can shut the run down or at least keep it in check, that will be key to them on defense. But what are your thoughts there?
Exactly. You don't want the Saints to start reeling off 5-7 yard runs, because especially on the outside, because one thing with Kamara, he's one of the most patient runners in the league. He's very astute when it comes to just waiting for the blocks to develop, and then if he has to do a little quick hurdle or a spin move, like don't be fooled by his size. He is very difficult to bring down, and I do think he's coming to the season with a chip on his shoulder. Given that last year, I think people kind of forgot about him a bit. So definitely got to monitor that and just get off the field. Like we say all the time, but get off the field on third down. I thought the Falcons' third down defense was pretty atrocious last year, and hopefully with DMPs being more aggressive and just the secondary being better. Like I'm really excited to see these safeties, because I think one of the most frustrating things about the Falcons defense last year was just the lack of range. Like, we talk about Eric Harris just not being able to cover the ground that was needed, and Teron Horn looking like he lost his step. Now it's like you're going the full youth route, and there can be some coverage busts and some blunders, but you have two guys hopefully that can cover space and force some turnovers.
Yeah, I think so, and I think the same can be said for D. Alford, right? Like these young guys, hungry, rangy ball hawks, and it's like, look, it's always a trade-off. Like last year they went with the veterans, they were hoping for fewer coverage busts but maybe not as much playmaking, and like in some ways it did work, right? Like they didn't allow a single 40-yard play because these safeties were pretty much always where they were supposed to be. They didn't really allow massive busts, right? But it's like that they accomplished what they wanted with that. It just didn't stop the team from giving up touchdown drives, but it did stop them from giving up massive plays ever, apparently. This year, they're probably going to give up some 40-yard plays. But if they could trade a few 40-yard plays for like 5 or 6 more interceptions, they would do it in a heartbeat, because that could be the difference between winning 3 games and winning 6 games, those 5 or 6 turnovers. So, I think that will be key as well. On the offensive side, what do you think is the key for the Falcons to come away victorious here?
Ooh. I hate to make this in such a time possession game, but it really comes down to, because I think I don't want to use generic terms, but they really have to avoid third long, because one of my biggest concerns with Mariota is just his tendency to hold onto the ball for too long, and he doesn't always make the smartest play when it comes to whether it's protecting the ball or throwing to coverage. Like, it's just try to avoid those third longs and allow Arthur Smith to utilize those bootlegs that he was using in the preseason. Get Mariota on move. Force the Saints defense to get off their spots and make them uncomfortable. It just ultimately, like, first and second down, like, just put yourself in advantageous positions, because I just think if this becomes a third and long type game, that plays right into the Saints fans, and then they're going to get more time possession. They're going to dial up those blitzes, and it could rattle Kyle Pitts, where they can put multiple defenders on them, and then you're really putting pressure on your receivers to win the one-on-one matchups when you have to convert on 3rd and 10. So I think the biggest thing for the Falcons is don't get away from the run. Try to get Cordell Patterson as active as possible. Get him on a couple screens, utilize him as a receiver, create those mismatches. But most importantly, I think the Falcons are going to win. Just have to avoid third long because I just think that's where the Saints defense eats.
Yeah, yeah, and like even if you're not finding a lot of success on the ground, like supplement that with the short passing game. Like hit those dump offs, hit those running back screens. Avery Williams is going to be active. Like this is a guy that I think they have a role for in the passing game as a passing game focused running back. You
Is
can
he
supplement
this year's
with that.
Felipe Franks, or is Felipe Franks
Hopefully
this year's
better. Yeah, hopefully better than last year. Yeah. I think that they want someone to play the Mike Davis role. Like Mike Davis sort of became like their de facto like short yardage receiver last year. I think he caught almost like 50 passes. I think.
Oh wow! Did not know
Yeah,
that.
he caught so many. He was like their third highest targeted player or something like that. They want someone to dump the ball off to supplement the run game if it's not working, and I think it could be obviously Cordell Patterson, but I think Damian Williams has a legit chance Avery Williams. There's a lot of Williamses in the running back room. I think Avery Williams could be that guy. So
Damian does have the experience though.
He does. Yeah, Damian's gonna be gonna be involved.
Yeah.
Change of pace guy
as well. So
yeah, I mean, I think their running back depth is pretty good, like better than last year. I think all three of their runners are trustworthy, and I think we'll see something from Avery Williams maybe in the passing game. But yeah, I'm going with the kiss of death by predicting the Saints, like because that's what I did last year, and it ended up working in that one game. So I will predict the Saints to win this one in a very close game, and hopefully just doom them with my kiss of death. Who do you got in this one, Alan?
Are we giving a score?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to go Saints 23-16. I'm pretty high on the Saints going into the year. I think they're going to make the playoffs. Like I'm looking at the NFC. NFC is wow. I haven't seen the NFC this week as a conference in over a decade, but I do like that. Even though the Saints are in like rough shape cap-wise, they have built a pretty good roster, and I still think the Falcons, as we know, are a work in progress. But I do think it will be a close game. I could see both teams forcing multiple turnovers. It could become a little bit of a slop fest, where it ultimately just comes down who's going to make the more explosive plays. And unfortunately, I can see Kamara being the difference maker.
Yeah. I have something similar. I think I'll go like Saints 24, Falcons 20. I do think it'll be close. I think it might be that we're into the final minutes of the game and it's like 21-20, and the Saints just create a little bit of extra space with that field goal, and the Falcons have a chance to win it at the end, but it's going to be tough. So I think it'll come down to something like that. The Falcons have a chance to win it with a touchdown, and they just have to execute that drive. And if they can, they'll win, and if they can't, then it'll be week one loss. But I think they'll have an opportunity to win, which is something we haven't seen in week one in at least 3 years. Like usually by the end of week one, all of the previous years, it's been like, oh wow, we're down like 3 scores. This is
really has been since 2018. Like 2019, I thought was the bleakest. 2020 was much better, and then last year, you got no words for last year.
Yeah.
So I do think it would be so Falcons if the game ends with Tyrann Mathieu interception to like seal the win. It would just be
pick two.
So Falcons. It'd just be like
they'll go for the 2 point to win. Yeah.
Man, because even though he's going for down year, you just know being back home. He's always been a ball hawk. You just have a feeling Tyrann Mathieu might do something.
Yeah, I think they've lost a lot at safety. I think Tyrann Mathieu will be a good pickup for them. I think the questions elsewhere are much bigger concerns for them, like slot, the other safety spot, the other corner spot. So we'll see. I do think the Falcons are going to play better than people think in this one.
It's a very intriguing matchup. Obviously, it's the first time since 2005. That there's no Sean Payton or Matt Ryan. Like it's been such a long time. So like both teams are kind of in a new era. Yeah. But there's a lot of exciting young talent, a lot of intriguing pieces, and I think it's just two teams that are still kind of finding their way. Given I think both had pretty active all seasons. So I think the timing's pretty cool that these teams are playing against each other.
Yeah, I'm not a betting man, but if you're really high on the Falcons, the odds are pretty good. I think to make some money on it if you're confident. Now, I wouldn't say like bet your life savings or anything, but the Falcons are plus 200 right now.
Looking out for the people.
Yeah. The Falcons are plus 200 on straight money line right now at home in week one against a division rival. I think that's pretty good odds if you're feeling good in the Falcons. Like you can double your money on a small bet if they win. So I don't bet. But I think that one's actually tempting because I do think that it's week one. People are probably overvaluing the Saints. There's a lot of injured players. Like if you're going to do it now before they rule out like Paulson Adebo and some of these other guys that might get ruled out. And you maybe you can make some money, maybe not, but this is not financial advice. This is just I had to write our picks article, so I saw the odds and I was like, that's tempting. So there you go.
This is strategic football advice.
Yes, yes. This is we're just looking at the numbers and just talking. So don't get confused. Yeah, but Alan, this was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it over the rest of the season. Guys, he is Alan Strk at Alan, no underscore Strk. I will fix that by next week, I promise. I'm going to fix it right after the show so I don't forget. Okay. Alan, I know you wanted to plug some stuff that you're working on, so let the people know.
Yeah, I have a piece coming out called Franchise Cornerstones where I'm looking at which Falcon players could emerge. Like I thought last year, Kyle Pitts, AJ Terrell, Chris Lindstrom became players that this franchise could build around. So I kind of looked at the next crop of players that I believe I put the list of 5. I'm not going to name the players, read the article, but I did like a big breakdown of which 5 players could become those players because ultimately this year, Falcons roster, it's like we're looking for these next crop of players who are the guys that they could build around the next 2, 3, potentially 5 years. So I did that, and my company OSC, they're telling me, all right, you do a lot of podcasts. Can you start promoting Rap'em? So I got to get in the groove with this. So yes, download the OSC app. You can listen to this fine podcast and the rest of the Falcons audio content on the app. All you got to do is download it. I am one of the main managers for the app, so it'd be greatly appreciated. And we're cranking up. It's that time of year. I know you have a lot of good stuff. The team's got a lot of great stuff. So getting back in that weekly grind. I don't have like a set schedule when it comes to like what articles are coming out on a weekly basis. I'm kind of just putting together creative ideas. I think that's the best way I've worked. But of course, we'll do some collaborations. I'm definitely going to bring back the mailbag. I keep calling it mailbag. It's not a mailbag. It's a writers roundtable. I don't know why I call it the mailbag. Writers roundtable will be coming back. You helped me a lot with the last year, which I greatly appreciate. Definitely bringing you back to that. So be on the lookout for that.
Absolutely, guys. Lots of good stuff coming from Alan. Alan's like the long form king. So I think it works best like if you just sort of pick what's interesting and then write it. Because if you're like locked into a topic every week, it can get stale. But I think if you sort of go into it more freeform, I think that tends to produce better content. But it's just me. Yeah. Maybe. Guys, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcaholic Kevin. I will have stuff like literally every day of the week. I will be doing more of a production focused role this year because of the 4 shows. But I will still have plenty of written content coming as well, so you can look for that. And our new schedule here on the Falcaholic Live / Falcaholic Podcast will be this show on Fridays, which I'm sure you're listening to now, so thank you. We will have a post-game show immediately following the game on Falcaholic Live on YouTube. We will have a film recap on probably coming out Tuesday, so you can look for that on everything as well. And then, of course, our live show on Wednesday at the usual time, 8 p.m. Eastern. If you don't mind giving us a like and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching there, or just sharing stuff, letting everyone know about the great podcast you listen to, concerning the Falcons. If you don't like it, then you don't have to say anything. What'd your mom tell you? If you don't have anything nice to say, no, I'm just kidding. Do whatever you want, but we do appreciate everyone.
Life wisdom.
Yeah, there you go. No, we do appreciate everyone for tuning in and watching. Really looking forward to the season. Hopes are high, and we got real Falcons football coming in just a few days. So, guys, thank you so much. For myself, for Alan, we will see you guys next week. Have a great day, folks.